Vicar General Father Martin Sirju has been a priest for about 33 years now. Though small in physical stature, his homilies always seem to pack a heavy punch, tackling head-on the day-to-day bread and butter issues that affect our people. Today we welcome Father Martin to the ALTOS set for the first time. Father Martin, welcome.
Thank you, Neil.
It's good to have you here.
Glad to be here.
Very long in coming.
Yes, it took some time.
Father, we've just celebrated the country's 48th anniversary of independence, of republicanism, sorry. Tell us, in your opinion, how have things changed, in your view? How have things changed over the last 48 years for you, for this country as a whole?
Well, 48 years is more than a generation, so that's a big gap. And there are many things that have happened since then in terms of technological development. But also one of the big casualties is the whole religious identity across the board, not just among Catholics, but among people in general, all religious traditions. And I think because of the thinning of religious identity, we have a value crisis. I remember many years ago, Pope John Paul II said, so this would have been in the 1980s, that the world, using a theme, a notion from St. John of the Cross, the dark night of the soul, and he said, the world seems to be caught in a collective dark night of the soul. And I think that is where we are at. If we check now 48 years, and that's, as I said, more than a generation. So a great shift has taken place in people's consciousness. We have moved away from our religious traditions providing answers for us, nourishment, opinions, and it has now shifted to the person. And once it shifts to the person, of course, the whole transcendental dimension becomes eclipsed. So I think part of our problem today is the world, including Trinidad and Tobago, the Caribbean. We are in a spiritual crisis. We are in a spiritual dark night of the soul. But the thing is, you can't force people to come out of that. People have to choose to come out of that. And maybe that's one of the good things in the shift in religion, in that now you don't do it because everybody else does it. Now you do it because I want to be there. I want to be in another place.
But Father, off-air we were talking, it's interesting you talk about that thinning of the identity. Off-air we were talking about the dwindling numbers of persons coming to Mass at the cathedral.
Yes.
And that's a reality that we have to face with.
Yes.
Coupled with that, that thinning of identity, of religious identity, given the country, the state the country is in, do you see a consequential thinning of identity as Trinbagonians? That we no longer see ourselves in that terms as patriotic Trinis, so to speak. That we no longer believe in the ideal of Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes, I think that is significantly true. And it's one of the consequences of globalization, because once globalization is alive and active as it is, and now AI technology, then we are more impacted by global forces. So how do you balance the global and the local? In an interview recently with Mindy Chokdas, Ryan Beecher did that interview, and Choki said that one of the things we are not doing is we are not passing on education in the true sense of the word. Education related to our identity, our history, our local heroes, who we are, and things like that. But that's not the only way in which it is affected, because we always say that the family is the place that holds society together. If the family is tightly bound, then society will be tightly bound as well. But one of the glues that kept families together, if not the main one, used to be religious practice. Right. So if religious practice has now weakened, then that family bonding and so on, family conflict and things like that will get worse.
The center no longer holds. Things fall apart.
The center no longer holds.
That loss of the transcendental that you speak of, linked in a number of ways to the proliferation of social ills in the society. We see poverty, we see homelessness. You see it at the cathedral, it's on your very doorstep. How is the church responding to that? I mean, your homilies, speak powerfully to a failure to respond at times. How, in your opinion, you're at the cathedral, what are you seeing? Are we responding as potently as we ought to be responding as church?
Well, I want to bring in here the expression used by Pope Benedict, and that is co-responsibility. Mm-hmm. And that is, especially today, the pastor, the pundit, the imam, whomsoever, cannot be the only religious leader. He's the main one in the parish, but he must get everybody involved as well. And I think all religions need to do as much as they can, and even more than they are doing, to get into communities, get into households, and to meet people where they are at. Pope Francis keeps saying that what we have to do is to go out. And in his recent visit to places like Indonesia, East Timor, and so on, the Pope has really gone on the periphery. So if we take that global example, mm-hmm. and then we try to narrow it down, it means that every religious community has to find a way of engaging people in the area, of meeting them where they are at. There is a lot of trauma right now in the country, and if we know of families who have suffered trauma and so on, they need some kind of spiritual help, we should have that network on the ground so that we can go in there and offer whatever assistance we can. Let me say, however, that even though people often say, what are the religions doing? What is the IRO doing? If you look at the macro story, you may not see so much. But if you look on the micro level, there are many ways in which parishes help people from challenged backgrounds, socioeconomic challenges, and help them to move up little by little. I think there has been a disvaluing of education. Once there is a disvaluing of education, society is going to suffer immensely. Amartya Sen had said, the Nobel laureate in economics had said, if you want a stable society, if you want an economic, prosperous society, you have to start with education. I remember my teacher, Father Henry Charles, mm-hmm. once said in his family, sometimes they had to choose between books and food. And guess what they chose? Books. They chose books. Mm-hmm. And so the whole business of education and also having the necessary ancillary staff to help with the sort of educational problems we have, whether it's ADHD, autism, literacy problems, mm-hmm. and so on. But I think if there is a greater valuing of education in families, I think we will see a betterment in society. The church is also doing work in certain areas. So like Father Matthew, who has recently moved into Gonzales, has been doing quite some work in the community. Also, Sister Debbie De Rose next door to me in Sea Lots there. Sea Lots is also part of Cathedral community, but because of the turf wars and so on, people can't freely cross from one place into the other.
The borderlines you speak of.
So she has been doing work there for about 7 or 8 years with good results. We just saw the opening of the vocational school in Sea Lots. And also I work with the police youth group in St. Paul Street. So St. Paul Street is
there's a lot being done.
Yes, I think there's a lot being done. As they say, the bad news gets in the media, the good news doesn't get in the media.
Of course. But Father, you spoke of the traumatization of the society. Where you live on South Key there, you would hear the gunshots, you would hear the everything and see everything. Are you traumatized as a priest, and not only as a priest, but as a citizen living in downtown Port-au-Spain?
I don't feel traumatized. I don't feel scared either. Maybe if I were to be a victim, personally of some kind of violent crime, I might think differently. But I don't feel afraid on the Brian Lara Promenade.
Okay.
And I walk the streets. When I go walking, sometimes I choose Nelson Street, Piccadilly, Duncan. So I think some people know me. Yeah. I walk in the area. I used to hear more frequently gunshots at night. Almost every other night, I will hear gunshots anywhere from 11 to about 2 in the morning. My colleague who was formerly at the shrine, Lapentale, Father Trevor Nattersing, he said part of it sometimes is just gunplay, guys showing up their guns late in the night. And I suspect that is true because the next morning I don't hear about anybody being killed.
Right.
So maybe some of it was gunplay and some of it did result in violence. If the police says it's unsafe to go into this area, well, I don't play foolish and go.
You're not going to take any unnecessary chances. But Father, how does that speak to us then about this whole thrust of the church now to synodality? How do we bring that level of synodality or that understanding of synodality to these communities, these traumatized communities?
Right. So synodality, one of the lovely things about synodality is its inclusive dimension. And incidentally, the parish priest of an area, even though parish boundaries have become very fluid, the parish priest of an area was always someone who had a concern not only for his flock, but whosoever lives in the parish. And synodality reminds us of that as a church, focusing on synodality, we must also have a care not only for our own, but for the society at large. So I think synodality impels us to do the best that we can in terms of stabilizing our society. Today is the feast or memorial of St. Vincent de Paul, and so that reminds us very importantly of the place of the poor in the life of the church. And one of the major statements coming out from the Second Vatican Council is that the church at the council took an option for the poor. So we have to be involved concretely in the lives of the poor. It's hard to do that when society is becoming increasingly violent. But sometimes I ask myself if more cannot be done, if we cannot all work together in the sense that, it has been said from what I've been seeing in the newspaper, do we have the best crime plan possible? You have people like Darius Figueroa, you have Dr. Randy C. Prasad, you have some other people who have been writing on crime, and they have the data. They have been saying that we have to get into the communities. So it's not only what the church can do, but in a spirit of synodality, what we all can do together. How can we participate? How can we network? And then shift this collective fear that is over the country. And there is a psychiatrist who wrote 2 articles in the Express. Maybe it appeared in the other newspapers, I don't know. He is a resident in the UK, and he said that we are talking about the economic impact, or rather the impact of crime on the economy. But he says we have not been talking enough about the impact of a collective trauma on the society. Because if you don't deal with that trauma, you're dealing with people who are traumatized. They're afraid to come to work. They're afraid to travel and things like that. And he said if the crime gets worse, then that kind of trauma, Dr. Lutchman, I think his name is, that kind of trauma will increase. And therefore you have to attend to that as well. And that strikes me as more as a state function. How do we get the best crime plan working so that we can help society relieve that collective trauma? And of course, religious organizations, including the church, will also see how we can come to the assistance of those who grieve. Father Matthew and myself were doing that.
Father, that's a good place for us to end this very brief but very, very informative interview. We thank you very much, and we hope we'll see you at the cathedral or back on the set here at ALTOS soon, in the not too distant future.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Father.
Okay.
Good having you.